This is turning into this story of like women who are being kind of like their insecurities are being like tortured out of them. And then we have all of these men who are kind of just giving the bare minimum.
Hi, we're Julie and Kelly, and we're here to find love. We're two dating coaches analyzing The Bachelorette, in particular, Gabby and Rachel's season 19 season.
So we are in episode 4 of Rachel and Gabby's season. We started off by taking things out of the Bachelor mansion, and we are off to Paris. I think they were like in like a really good zone and mood as soon as they got out into Paris, only for things to topple shortly after, but we'll get into that.
We'll get to that, yeah.
But we started off with Rachel and Gabby both got a one-on-one date. Rachel took Tino to Paris and Gabby took Jason to Paris. So nothing really out of the ordinary happened. Both of the dates seemed to go really well. Rachel seems to really like Tino. Gabby seems to really like Jason. Both of them got roses. I was not particularly impressed by either of them. Not that they seemed bad or anything. They were just, I don't know. I just feel like their energy seemed to be really low on the date.
Can't imagine a better day.
I wasn't particularly convinced by either of them that they liked the girl that they were with that much. I don't know. But the internet seemed to really like both of them. The internet was like really into Tino and Rachel's whole thing. And the internet seems to be really into like Gabby and Jason's whole thing too. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought really similarly to you as well. I mean, the guys are attractive and they look really good with the leads, but I didn't see that same kind of excitement that I think would have warranted that kind of one-on-one date in such a romantic city. It did feel a little bit lackluster, not giving a lot of energy. So it was a little bit weird how people were reacting so strongly to them. It just didn't seem like they were very, I don't know, it just didn't feel like sparkly or exciting at all. I just thought, okay, date with like a pretty attractive man. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt too. I was like, okay, Tino is good looking. Jason,
very good looking.
Good looking guys. They didn't do anything wrong, but they also didn't do anything that was like particularly sweet or particularly moving or particularly, I don't know, or they didn't even seem particularly like excited to be with the girls that they were with. Like I think of like Nate, like I keep thinking, like every time I see Nate, like every time Nate sees Gabby, the way he looks at her, I'm just like, oh my God, I want everyone.
I want that.
Yeah, I want it for myself. And I want like the guys to be looking at Gabby and Rachel that way. And I don't feel like all of them are. I keep getting like a weird, I don't know, just like a little bit of like an almost checked out vibe from a lot of these guys. And I just kind of felt that way about Tino and Jason too. But I don't know.
I still think the same thing about this season as well. It's like they're not getting that same kind of excitement where the men are screaming like Gabby and Rachel, you know, like when they get to a new city and they're just sitting around talking about the girls. It does seem more like a bro season, which once again, I don't love.
I completely agree. Let us know what you all think down below. Was anyone impressed by Tino or Jason? One thing I will say about Jason that I did like, I forgot to mention this, is Jason on his evening portion of his date with Gabby, he did bring up therapy and he seemed to, his experiences with therapy, and he seemed to be very willing to talk about that, which I did actually appreciate a lot. I love a guy who is willing to go to therapy and talk about therapy.
It's really rare to meet a man who appreciates therapy.
Yeah.
Because I think that it just shows a willingness to learn and grow and do that self-work, that inner work that's super attractive and definitely a good fit for Gabby, who also really enjoys doing that type of work or finds that type of work. I don't know if enjoys is the right word, but finds that work to be very valuable to her. And so I did think that was a good connecting point for the two of them, and that did make me like Jason a little bit more. I don't know if I would say that going to therapy is enough for me to say that, oh my God, you're such a great catch or a great catch for Gabby, but
agreed.
It did make me like him more, I will say that. Let us know down below what you all thought about Jason and what you all thought about Tino and those two dates. If you thought did you find them romantic? Like, let us know. Maybe we just missed the boat on the two of them, but yeah, let us know what you all think. After the Paris dates, the whole group moves on to this cruise ship. Gabby's guys are on one level, Rachel's guys are on another level, so they're kind of separated out, even in terms of where they're going to be living and staying. So that's kind of an interesting way that the show seems to be trying to create that division. But we moved into having 2 group dates. We started with Gabby's group date, so it was like a very typical boys are going to duke it out in an arena to prove their love type of date. So the group date itself, it was not, I mean, the actual activity was not very exciting. Spencer won the activity and later got the group date rose, right? He got the group date rose?
He got the group date rose, yeah.
The main thing that was happening on that group date that was of interest was Rachel. So Rachel showed up to that group date, and Rachel's guys, everyone came to like watch the men fighting and duking it out. And Rachel was sitting there with Gabby, and Rachel kind of started to have some insecurities coming out. She started to notice that none of her guys were talking to her. None of her guys like made eye contact with her.
My boys are being so aggro, not one of them looks at me. Look at them. Look at the eye lines. Someone look at me. One of you look at me.
And that put her in a pretty bad mood.
Like, just say something or make eye contact, and no one looked at me, no one sat by me, no one did anything. I'm by myself as Gabby's up there. It feels like no one's trying at all.
I mean, I do understand why she was feeling really jealous on the date. I think that a lot of it has been amplified because of the comparison happening with her and Gabby's season. Unfortunately, you can't help but compare yourself to like their journey, because that's what they've been doing the entire season. And I did feel really bad that her insecurities were coming out when none of the guys were talking to her. I did feel like she was being a little bit too sensitive to it because it was Gabby's date and they were just crushing it. Like, they were coming along to watch it, and I think the guys got really excited seeing the other men that had split off, and they started talking to them a lot, and they missed the point of connecting to Rachel, which is kind of an ongoing theme. Like, these guys are pretty excited about the leads, but not so excited where I feel like they're there for the lead. And I think Rachel was picking up on that, and then she felt really bad, and that was a little bit hard to see because it was, once again, Gabby's date, and it was about Gabby and who she was awarding the group date rose to. So I just felt like, okay, this is, once again, why did she have to crash the date? Why couldn't she have like her own date so that really could feel like her own experience? It's kind of another example to me of how the show is setting up these women to fail or creating all of these insecurities that really don't have to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that both of the women are very sensitive right now to feeling rejected. I will say that in this scene, I actually kind of understood where Rachel was coming from. I know that it wasn't her date, but she wasn't asking for the guys to do a lot. She was like, nobody made eye contact with me. And that's like bare minimum. She wasn't asking for everyone to profess their love to her, right? And so I completely understand what she's talking about. You know that feeling, I don't know, where you're like at a party or like at a bar with a big group of your people, and you know there's that one guy who you like know is paying attention to you. You don't even have to be talking to each other. He's across the room, but you can just tell they're kind of like, you know, you're making eye contact every now and then, and you can kind of just feel that he's paying attention, he's there, kind of like he's got you in the orbit, right? As opposed to you go to a party maybe like with a partner or with a date, and then they disappear and they don't talk to you the whole time, right? And it's like you want to feel like your partner is excited to be with you, spend time with you, and you know wants to like give you that kind of, you know, that kind of attention and that kind of engagement, and not just because they have to, but just because they are actually like, oh my god, Rachel's here, hi Rachel. Like, that's it, like wave, like that's all it really takes, right, to make that person feel like, oh, like he's happy to see me. And it's so bare minimum. And so I don't think that she was being unreasonable, because I just feel like you can really tell whether someone is actually interested in you and excited about you when you get into a group situation and you see how they treat you in the group situation. Of course, when you're one-on-one, everyone's going to be like, oh my god, I love you, I'm crazy about you, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's going to say that when you're one-on-one. But it's when you're in a group, that's when you can really feel, how is his energy with me compared to his energy with everyone else? Does he, like, you know, pick me out of a crowd? Does he give me that attention no matter if we're in public or private? Like, is that affection that he seems to have for me, is it consistent across different scenarios and situations? And so what Rachel was feeling, just like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, all of these guys who say they're like crazy about me, not a single one of them even waved at me. Like, I would be kind of upset too. It's like, I don't know, just like, smile.
That's a great point, because I do think that when you're in a group setting, you can really tell if someone likes you based on the energy they're carving out towards you. I think that, like, with the way it's set up, I felt like the boys, it always feels like this in every Bachelorette or Bachelor season. They always get a lot of time together, the group of people fighting for the lead. But this season feels like they're getting a lot of time together, and they're talking about things a lot more in complexity than any other season. And I think that did play into it, where the guys were like, oh my God, here's these other group of men that I was with last week. Let me just talk to them. And that for them was the main focus than the leads. And that's felt like that kind of the entire season so far. I haven't really felt like any of the guys have been super excited about any of the girls, save for a few guys, i.e. Nate. I mean, Nate is kind of like how you want all of the men to treat you if you were the Bachelorette.
Right.
I think he's the only one giving that kind of energy consistently. The rest of the guys are still like laying low in a very weird way.
I completely agree. I think this is odd. I feel like this is just turning into a story of women who are in a situation that is stoking their insecurities. I don't think that I don't think they're insecure in general, because they were not. Even Rachel said this at one point in her in the moment interviews. She was like, I wasn't like this in Clayton's season. I didn't feel this way in Clayton's season. Like, there's something about this situation that's like kind of bringing out the worst in me, right? Or bringing out these like awful insecurities that are not usually there, right? And so I feel like this is turning into the story of like women who are being kind of like their insecurities are being like tortured out of them. And then we have all of these men who are kind of just giving the bare minimum, which is exacerbating that, right? And so it's like the worst combination, actually. Like, people who are insecure and people who like don't want to give any affection or give any like, you know, engagement into the process. Like, it's the kind of the worst combination of groups of people. I think he said this really well last week, that, you know, these people are being put into the situation. For the girls, it's like they are being forced into this like awful thing that's gonna like make it's like designed to hurt them, and then designed to make them feel rejection and pit them against each other and feel like they're getting compared. And then the guys are in this situation where they're kind of being incentivized to like hold their cards close. And they're kind of being incentivized to like not lean in as far as most contestants on this show typically do, right? Every season the guys this is the whole point, they're all there to like, you know, really, really lean into a connection with the lead. But in this season, like, the guys are kind of not being incentivized to do that. They're kind of, you know, holding back. And I think that it's really, you can see the effect that it's having on Rachel and Gabby. And I saw the internet, I think a lot of people are starting to get fed up with Rachel and Gabby's like meltdowns, but I think that they're having more meltdowns than most bachelorettes because they're in a different environment than every other bachelorette has been in before them. So I think it makes sense why they are feeling as insecure and as sensitive as they are, because I think it's pretty intentional on the part of the production.
Which is very gross to watch, because this was the trauma that they went through of Clayton's season that I was hoping that they would avoid. I really thought it was going to be split a lot more cleanly than it has been, but I feel like they're still playing up on a lot of their insecurities around being compared or not being chosen.
Right.
And they keep getting put in situations where that feeling keeps sparking up.
The next thing that happened was Rachel's group date. So Rachel, after that fighting scene on Gabby's date, she went to her group of guys crying. She let them know, like, hey, I felt really ignored and rejected and, you know, just left on the bench while you were all having a good time, and it made me feel really lonely. And so she told the guys that. They all seemed very shocked. They did not seem to know that that was coming. And I think it's good that she said something, and just good for them to have that wake-up call that if this is the person you're trying to date, in theory, like, this is someone that you care about. Yeah, I think you should be aware of their emotional state. And if you know that they're in a situation where they're more sensitive maybe than they would be ordinarily, then you should be more attentive than maybe you need to be ordinarily, right? So I think it's good that she said that. Hopefully the guys are going to come through. And we saw it happen. So Rachel went on to her group date. They had this weird, like, these romance experts making them like kiss and flirt with each of the guys. It was a very odd little date, but the guys did seem to show up and seem to be wanting to make her feel really loved. Rachel ended up giving her group date rose to Tyler. Tyler, I will say, is one of the few on Rachel's side that I think is really, really into her. He seems to be very, very excited. He kind of gives me, actually I was thinking this about Nate, and I think Tyler sort of too, but definitely Nate, give me Dylan vibes. Remember Dylan and Hannah G from Bachelor in Paradise?
Ooh,
like Hannah
right.
G was just like hot as hell, hot commodity. Everyone wanted to be with Hannah G. And Dylan was just this like sweet
Puppy
sap
dog.
who was like just so in love with her. And he was just like, oh, I'll wait until you're ready to love me. And she like dated all the other guys until she finally realized like, oh, okay, I do want to be with Dylan. And now they're happy and they're still together, I think like 3 years later. But Nate is kind of giving me Dylan vibes. And Tyler kind of gives me Dylan vibes too, of just like very puppy dog, like very much like heart eyes in love, will just kind of like, you know, gonna be sweet and at their side until they're ready to give them love. So yeah, I think Rachel also like really needed a little bit of that at that moment, and Tyler was very willing to give it to her. The one thing I will say about Tyler and Rachel's conversation during that like little evening portion of that date was like they were kind of talking about this concept. Tyler brought up this idea of like, I really love being in love, even if it hurts me. Like getting hurt is worth being in love. And Rachel was like, oh my God, I totally agree with you. And I was like, huh, interesting.
I got a little nervous. When I saw that, because it's like, oof, love is not supposed to hurt like that.
Yes.
And I think believing in that is believing in a type of love where conflict, oof, that you might not see it correctly. You might see big gestures incorrectly. You might not be able to really stake the relationship with a lot of realism that it needs to have the relationship grow into something that can be really fortified and strong. It seems like a lot of big statements, big gestures. I did feel a little bit like, okay, that is why Tyler is the way he is in terms of like looking at, you know, Rachel of Goo Goo Eyes. It's because he is such a big romantic that it's like, I do love that side of him, but I think, I don't know.
Yeah, I think this idea that Tyler and Rachel seem to have that like, it's supposed to hurt. Love is supposed to be painful. It's like, that's the stuff that leads people to stay in unhealthy relationships. It's like that mentality is what makes people stay longer than they need to or longer than they should in a relationship that isn't working. Because they're like, well, it's supposed to hurt, right? It's supposed to be painful. And it's like, it's not. Doing your inner work is hard, right? Doing the inner work you need to do to be secure and show up in a relationship as your best self, that's hard. But like, it shouldn't be painful to be in love, right? And in theory, once you are able to do a lot of that inner work, that shouldn't be the case. If you're in a healthy relationship where both people are equally engaged and both giving as much as, you know, the other one is giving, like, it's not supposed to hurt. It's supposed to feel good. Like, relationships are supposed to be nice and pleasant and stable. So yeah, I was a little concerned by that kind of theme that was coming up between the two of them.
Yeah, dude, big love, big feelings. That's what I keep getting from these girls. Like, okay, they have big expectations for it, and all of their big feelings, though, which is really interesting, has not been any like crush-worthy or swoon-worthy moments. It's just been insecure and like feeling really jealous and really unsure of themselves. Like those feelings seem to be the main flavor than anything else this season. So watching it is, I'm not really watching the dynamics of the girls and the guys. I'm watching how the girls are kind of interacting within this very obvious, show experiment. Yeah,
that's really well said. And actually, Rachel says that at one point. She's like, I don't know if I can find love in a place where I keep having bad days over and over, which is actually a smart thing for her to recognize that, yeah, it's really hard to know what a relationship will be like outside of this environment where she's kind of being pushed through the ringer. Like, she's not showing up as her kind of like normal self, right? She's not normal Rachel in this environment. She's this Rachel that's being like tortured, and she's trying to like be normal and like laugh, but she's like basically being tortured by production, and she's trying to find love through that, which, you know, it's kind of a weird scenario to think that you're going to be able to form an authentic connection with someone as opposed to, say, like, I don't know, just like a trauma bond or something, right? Or like, you know, or a trauma bond as in the abusive way, or just like bonding with someone because they're in a traumatic situation and like, this is the only person that makes me feel marginally better. And it's like, is that real love, or is that just you looking for feelings of safety in a situation that is traumatic? Because in your real life, hopefully your real day-to-day life is not going to be as traumatic as this situation is. And so will that relationship still be necessary or make sense outside in the real world? I don't know. So I think she's probably onto something, and you're onto something, Julie, that it's hard to find a real lifelong connection in this environment for these two women.
That's so well said. And I think that's going to be the main tension of the season. It's not going to be like, what are these men giving the girls? It's if the girls can even be themselves, if they can be who they want to be, the leads they were hoping that they would be before the season started for them, and seeing if you can find love when everything is really messed up and everything is like on hard mode for you. Totally. They're definitely playing it on hard mode, which is
hard mode.
Hard
That's
to see.
Good way to say it. Yeah, it just feels like they're kind of just getting sabotaged, frankly, by production.
Yeah. Dude, left and right.
Yeah, they're being sabotaged by production, and then they're like, oh, why am I doing it so badly? And it's like, I don't think you're doing it badly, girl.
You're not.
You're just playing on hard mode, like, in a way that no one else has had to. So we get to the rose ceremony, and prior to the rose ceremony, during the cocktail party, the big thing that kind of comes up is that Logan has been realizing over the course of the week that even though he's on Rachel's side and in Rachel's group of guys, he's realizing that maybe he doesn't actually have that strong of a connection to Rachel, and actually he's still thinking about Gabby and thinks that maybe he wants to pursue things with Gabby instead. And so that's kind of his main conflict, and so he gets to the cocktail party and decides that he wants to tell or talk to Gabby and then talk to Rachel about the fact that he wants to essentially switch sides, which overall I think is fine that he feels that way. The problem is that he doesn't talk to them and goes to the rose ceremony even though he already knows that he wants to date Gabby, and Rachel gives him a rose and he takes it. And that's the big issue with the way he approached the situation. Frankly, I was like really grossed out. I thought it was super disgusting because by the time of that rose ceremony, before the ceremony even happened and they were at the cocktail party, he already knew that he wants to pursue Gabby. So to me, the fact that and some other drama happened. Oh, that whole Hayden thing happened. I can't even get into it. Whatever. This whole Hayden thing happened.
Yeah, Hayden.
Whatever, gross. Hayden happened. He had like called Gabby and Rachel bitches, and like he had like compared the two of them to his ex-girlfriend. There was all kinds of Hayden drama that had been happening throughout the episode, and then finally during this cocktail party, Meatball brought it to Rachel's attention, and Rachel sent Hayden home. So that kind of took up a lot of time during the cocktail party. So Logan was like, oh no, I've run out of time. But I still think that he could have just, like, before the ceremony started, pulled Rachel aside and told her so Rachel didn't waste a rose on him, which is what happened, right? He just accepted Rachel's rose, essentially so he can get closer to Gabby or still have a chance with Gabby. And I think that that's super low. Rachel sent home a guy that actually wanted to date her and that, you know, she could have been continuing to nurture a connection with, and instead she gave it to Logan because Logan is lying to her face. And that really, really sucks to me. I think that's super just like low and like, it's just like cowardly.
And I think too that watching it was another example of yet again these men centering their experience over the girls. Like for him to be like, I feel a little bit uncomfortable being the person to maybe say it. I didn't find the right time. Oh my God, I'm just going to take the rose anyways, and I'll talk to Rachel about Gabby afterwards. He is really not thinking about how Rachel would feel knowing that he would backtrack and try to get into Gabby's like group, which is causing another friction of insecurity between how she's feeling about her season, that none of the guys really want to be with her, that they might feel like they're in the, she said this and I thought, oh my God, when I heard it, the loser group, like they weren't in the right group, they weren't with the right lead. So I just felt like, wow, yet again, and Hayden was kind of the same example. Like he was centering his experience over the girls, and the way that he was talking about them was really indicating that, yeah, these girls have an uphill battle to face. And I wish Logan said something on the date, because it's really going to hurt the next ceremony when, you know, that finally comes out and she's down more men, right? Because she's been losing out on roses. Oof, it was tough to see.
Yeah, it was really tough. I completely agree. It's selfish, right? It's just him. It's him centering he says, he's like, oh, I do really care about Rachel. It's like, you don't care about her. If you cared about her, you wouldn't
would
let
say
her
something.
waste her rose on you. You don't say you care about her. You care about yourself, and you want to do whatever you need to do to get what you want. Don't say that you care about her, because that is some BS. And like if I was Gabby and I found out that this had happened, frankly, for me, this is like a deal breaker, because what this shows, I'm not saying that Logan is a bad person, but what to me this shows is like this is an indication of his character, right? It's like this is an indication of like how you make decisions and like how you think about other people and how your actions affect other people. It's a question of integrity, right? It's a question of, will you do the right thing even if you can get away with the easier thing? And clearly we saw like how he will behave in this type of situation. So if I'm Gabby, or if I'm any girl who's like thinking about dating Logan, I would look at this and be pretty concerned and just think like, I need to know that you have changed from this Logan before I can consider dating you. So if I was Gabby, I wouldn't even accept him into my group of guys, because that shows how willing he is to be careless with someone else's emotions, when it would have been very easy for him to get exactly what he wanted, which was to date Gabby without hurting Rachel. He could have gotten what he wanted without hurting someone, and he's chose to do the easier thing at Rachel's expense. And so that to me is like pretty much a deal breaker. I hope Gabby doesn't accept him into her group of guys, because I just think that behavior really, it says a lot about who you are.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hayden should have served as like maybe the ultimate warning as well, because the way that he spoke about Gabby and kind of being, oh, like maybe you're not my person, the way that he gave that feedback wasn't the best. And then the way that he talked about both of them was an indication of like, wow, this guy is kind of a jerk, and the way that he sees women is not the healthiest way.
Right.
So I really do hope that that's like a really good thing about the season, is that you're seeing these men interact in these multi-dimensional settings. So you're really seeing the personality get teased out. So pay attention. Like if they're treating one of the leads badly, that does say a lot about how they would treat you. So heed the warning and let them go.
So well said. That's the thing. Like, I always say, like, how a person treats an ex, a random stranger, their family member, a waiter, how a person treats anyone else, remember that is eventually how they will treat you. Eventually, when you are comfortable or when he's upset enough, that's how he's going to treat you. So pay attention.
Yeah, I'm going to keep that in my back pocket. Just for myself. Let us know in the comments below, what did you think about how Logan handled the situation? What would you have done differently? Because I think he should have just pulled her aside and said something. But the producers would have helped him. It would have been totally okay.
It would have been
so
fine.
Yeah, let us know in the comments down below. We want to hear what you think.
If you have watched this point of the video and you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button, because we do this every week. We are recapping every single episode of Gabby and Rachel's season and every episode of every show under Bachelor Nation, because we like to do that to ourselves. Make sure you're subscribed.
Torture ourselves.
If you haven't seen our recap of last week's video, we'll leave a link up here and down below. So make sure you watch that one too, and we will see you next week for episode 5. Bye.